I got section 12.3. I'm back in the garage again, 3 in a row now, and it's cold, but I will survive. I got this little handkerchief to keep me warm. All right, World War One. It's basically over. It just started, right? Well, welcome to AP, right? Where we go through wars just like that. So World War One. Couple things happened, though, in the year 1917 that changed the face of the war. First thing to note is Russia quits. It sucked to be a Russian soldier. By the end of the war, you've got Russians fighting without boots. They're fighting without guns. They give them a big, branch. And, I talked about this a little bit in the last video. And they go out there holding, branches and big wooden sticks, to give the idea that was a gun. So, they're just not industrialized to keep up. And it really is starting to drain and destroy the Russian attitude. There's some other things happening that get Russia out of the war. Come back for 12.4, we'll explain that. But they quit the war in the year 1917. And that's through what's called the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk. So it might have been early 1918 when they quit, but it was sometime around then. Now, something else that happens in 1917 is that when Russia's out, think about how key that is, because now Germany, which has been having to do this basically the whole war, now they can drop one of those arms and focus everything on the other side. But the problem with that is that when they take everybody and put them over in Western Europe, we got a new country in play, and it's the USA, the United States. Jumps into the war in 1917. The question is why? Why? Who cares about this war in Europe? Well, as time had gone on throughout the war, American ships taking cargo and passengers to Europe had constantly been under threat by German U-boats. And these submarines had basically been targeting American ships whenever they saw them. Now, yes, we were bringing supplies to the British, but basically the Germans said, you know what, I don't care if you're a neutral country. We're targeting your ships because we think you're helping our opponent, and that eventually draws the United States into the war in 1917 because of this unrestricted submarine warfare. America's entrance is like a second win for the Allies, and even though the Germans can focus on a one-front war now, it's not going to match the intensity that America brings to the Allied fight. And by the end of 1918, Germany and Austria-Hungary facing revolution and unrest at home, possible communist revolutions happening in Berlin and Vienna, like what will take place in Moscow and St. Petersburg. Germany and Austria-Hungary declare surrender, and a ceasefire is called on November 11th, 1918, at the 11th hour of the day. So it's at the 11th hour on the 11th day in the 11th month, November 11th, 1918 at 11 a.m., a ceasefire is called, and the Germans and Austro-Hungarians give up. And with that, what we will see is the dissolution of the Austro-Hungarian and Ottoman empires, but we'll get to that more here in a minute. So the Allies have won. The Allies have won. Britain, France, the United States have banded together and will win World War I, and the big loser, of course, is Germany. So what's our next step? Well, a peace conference is scheduled at Versailles. Of course, it's the Palace of Versailles. You got a ball out there, right? So at Versailles, you're going to see the leaders of the big four allied countries that will be in play. Okay, you have David Lloyd George, who is the British Prime Minister. You have Georges Clemenceau, who is the French Premier. You have Vittorio Orlando, who is the Italian leader, whatever his name is, and he's there just kind of I'm sure he's got nice shoes and brings spaghetti. And you have Woodrow Wilson, the American president, who had just won his second term in 1916. He will travel across seas to France to represent American interests at this peace treaty. Now, Italy is going to quit the peace conference because they don't get kind of the land grants that they think they should be getting. So Orlando goes home. And that's going to leave the French, British, and Americans to kind of run the show here, even though there are a lot of other representatives. Now, what's interesting is that the Germans are not invited to this peace conference. So while the terms are being crafted, the Germans are not going to have any influence on that, and they're just basically going to have to accept what they're given at the end. So what are we going to have? Well, Woodrow Wilson comes with a plan, right? He's not going to come willing to just say, oh, yeah, America likes that. I mean, he's going to bring a plan of 14 points that America should have and should maybe support. And he's going to bring that, try to get that pushed. It's his idea structure. It is extremely idealistic, right? So it ignores the practical measures of the war, and it's very much a high-minded, idealistic document that represents a vision of the world that Wilson thinks is appropriate to prevent future wars from happening. So what does he believe in? There's 14 points there. I'm not going to go through all 14, just the major points. Abolish secret treaties. This whole alliance system that had dominoed us into World War I, we got to get rid of that. So we need to be upfront with who we have treaties with so that we don't get ourselves into a bigger conflict than maybe we expected. We need to have freedom of the seas and trade. So the seas must be open, the ocean must be open to trade on without the fear of being sunk, right? Lusitania, unrestricted submarine warfare certainly had hurt America. America is so dependent on the seas for trade because we are isolated in North America a little bit. So those seas must be free. The promise of self-determination. I want you to star this one because it's a huge idea that all people groups have the ability or should have the ability to decide their political destiny. In other words, every single ethnic group should decide what they want. Do they want to be ruled by someone? Great. Okay, that's cool. Or do you want your own independence? Self-determination. You self-determine what your destiny will be. And this is a huge red flag for any country with an empire, right? So if you're Britain, if you're France, and you're like, ooh, freedom, sounds good, right? But this goes and flies in the face of what your empire is and what they depend on, certainly, at this point. And then here's the kicker. An international organization to ensure world peace. Countries come together, send delegates to this organization that gives the world a chance to talk out its problems before bad things happen. It might sound familiar because it's something that we have in our world today. So that is what Wilson really wants. This is, let me get my pen up here. This is point, well, what am I doing here? I want my pen. There we go. This is point 14. So this was like the hammer at the end, right? And it's something that he really did want. Now, at this conference, though, Britain and France are going to have much different motives. While Wilson's is very idealistic, Britain and especially France are looking for German pain. I mean, we don't want to even see the word Germany when we're done with this. I don't know if this is going to cover it up, but if it's yes, there it goes, soak in the blood of your enemies, right? I mean, there they go. And that's what they want because Germany, in their fairly, to say the least, had started this war and brought them into it. So the French and British want to punch them in the face and get it over with. So with that, we basically can wipe Germany off the face of the earth, take that Otto von Bismarck, suck on that, right? I mean, what they don't want. I don't know what sound that was. I apologize for that. Anyway, so that. Sorry for the sounds. Okay, you'll be fine. So they go through the treaty process, they come up with things, and here's the decisions that are made. The Treaty of Versailles, 1919, I would say along with the Treaty of Westphalia, the most significant treaties in the course of European history. Treaty of Versailles. Article 231 of the treaty says that all blame for the war is on Germany. So you tried to blame Serbia for all of your problems. Guess what? France, Britain, the United States don't agree with you. We put all the blame on Germany. So everything for the war went back to Germany, and they were the ones that started the war. So what does that mean? A, reparations. Germany has to pay for the war debt of the Allies. They not only have to rebuild their own country, but they also have to help financially rebuild the Allies. Dollar bills, baby. I mean, it's going to take a lot to come back from that. Demilitarization. Their army is neutered. Their military, their navy is neutered. I'll give you details in a moment. There's basically nothing left. And if you're Germany with your militaristic past, that's like shedding and taking away your identity, right? They also lose all their colonies, which is not a huge loss because they didn't really have a lot of colonies anyway, but it's kind of another like a punch in the face. We also have the creation of the League of Nations, a body to ensure domestic peace and tranquility across the world. And it's based, of course, on Wilson's 14 points. That's great. I might mention this later in the Pideo, but let me go ahead and say it. Guess who doesn't join? The United States. We don't join Wilson's brainchild, right? It's interesting that Wilson campaigned for this, but when the treaty came back to Congress, Congress didn't like the idea of America being involved in world affairs like that. So Congress never ratified the treaty, meaning America never acknowledged this treaty, meaning we never joined the League of Nations. Britain and France are in. Germany, of course, is not allowed because they suck. And then, the Russia, they got their own problems, so they're not going to be in it either. So more on that coming later. So here's kind of a look at what Germany lost. Basically everything. I mean, you can pause it here and look at the different things, but I want to highlight, this is kind of what it is. Like all their colonies, 80% of their dreadnoughts, their fleet, and then their ability to get half of their iron production, about an eighth of their coal production, an eighth of their country, an eighth of the population gone. This area called Alsace-Lorraine goes back to France. It was France's before the Franco-Prussian War. Now it goes back to France. This area called the Rhineland, which is around the River Rhine, is demilitarized, meaning that the Germans cannot have a military presence at all in this area because it's, right on France's front door. And then you can see all the other things that are taken away from Germany. This is a hammer blow to the German identity and pride. Clemenceau, the French president, says to the German delegates, "Take to your seats, gentlemen," and you see it's a little bit of a spiky situation there. Here is Wilson perhaps begging to Clemenceau and Lloyd George to stop sending the German man to the guillotine, hypothetically perhaps seeing the problems that arise. Here's our German friend getting this note that says, "We give you until Monday, March 7th to decide our terms. Please remember that we won the war." So, hey, here's what you get, Germany. So we bring you in like to sign it, and by the way, we are punching you in the face. This is like, I get feels with this cartoon. Here is the Germans signing the peace treaty in 1919 at the Palace of Versailles, and the ghost of 1871 of Kaiser Wilhelm I, of Otto von Bismarck, and some random German dude. Watching and seeing that the Germany that they built be basically taken away. It's not divided, Germany's still there, but the ghost of Versailles say, what has happened to our German Reich, this empire that we built? It is gone with this peace treaty. And what about Kaiser Wilhelm II, the guy who may have manufactured the war? He's exiled, he's kicked out of power, and he is sent to the Netherlands, where he will live the rest of his days. And in the 30s, will remark of the dangers that he sees in Germany of this political movement called the Nazis. The Kaiser Wilhelm II speaks out against the forces that are bringing the Nazis to power. Perhaps a last bit of redemption after the chaos that he brought. He's also gotten rid of the wing mustache, and now it's just a solid beard. So there you go. So, why does this war matter? Well, let me count the reasons. Here's Europe in 1914. Here's Europe in 1919. A little bit more complicated, right? 1914, 1919, 1914. It's like when you go to the eye doctor and they ask you A or B, and you don't know which one to choose. Always pick B, because that's my first name, starts with B, and that's just a good thing to remember. So there you go. Anyway, we can look at a lot of differences here. We have redrawn the map, basically. Turkey, gobble, gobble, right? Where'd that Ottoman Empire go? They're gone. Ottoman Empire has fallen apart, and we have the creation of an independent Turkey. Poland! Yay! Poland's back. Oh, that's awesome, right? Because look, Poland's gone. And Poland's back! Self-determination, right? The Allies saw the need to return Poland to its state. By the way, a lot of this land here that Russia had given when Russia quit the war had been given to Germany. Remember, they basically signed a peace treaty with Germany, the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk, to say we quit. And then a lot of that land had been given to the Germans and Austrians. But now, obviously, they lost. It's going to be used to create independent countries with the ethnic groups getting their own area. The Ukraine, right, is an example of that, that they give their own country, or they get their own country as a part of land that was given away by Russia at the treaty. By the way, I say Russia. I'm not calling them the Soviet Union. We'll get to that in 13 or 12.4. Serbia. So, like, if you hated Serbia, well, here's one point, I guess. Serbia, Bosnia, and the other countries that have been defined in there all combined into what becomes Yugoslavia. I don't know why. I have to read up on that. Oh, Austria-Hungary. You're dead, right? Austria-Hungary is gone and divided into several countries. The empire is gone and it's divided into Austria, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, democratic states after the Treaty of Versailles, although that's not going to last. We'll get to that later. So yeah, there's all those lessons, or all those changes. In the Middle East, we have the creation of the mandates, right? The Ottoman Empire is gone, so what are we going to do with all these areas in the Middle East? Well, basically, Western Europe, France and Britain specifically, are going to come in and basically administer these independent countries, or in essence, colonies. So Iraq, Palestine, Syria, these areas are basically run by the League of Nations and by these powerful Western European countries. Iran, Saudi Arabia, Turkey all become independent countries. So if we look at the Middle East the way it is today, it really is formed and created out of post-World War I of the Treaty of Versailles. So by 1923, you have the creation of these areas. By the way, remember the Zionist movement? We'll keep an eye on that part of the world after World War II. Okay? See what happens there. Now, war impact. It's awful, the numbers. I mean, you can't even begin to fathom the amount of people. When we say the word casualties, we're talking about not only dead, but also injured, missing in action, prisoner of war. There's a whole lot of like qualifiers that go into that, but we can say for certain 10 million dead. And 10 million civilians die as well throughout the war. Not only add to that, but then at the end of the war, you have the breakout of the Spanish flu, which is as big a killer, honestly, as the war is. Watch Downton Abbey. What's her face? Lavinia? It's Matthew Crawley's one. I'm sorry, spoiler alert, but if you watch Downton Abbey, it's awesome. But, I mean, it's just a devastating decade. And think of, as we get into kind of the social impact, like, I'm going to take this off. It kind of look ridiculous. This is a huge turning point. It's a huge turning point. Socially and culturally. First of all, the end to long-standing royal dynasties. The Habsburgs, the Hohenzollerns, the Romanovs, all of them are gone. Central and Eastern European countries, their royal dynasties are out. The Habsburgs, which had been in power forever, they're gone, right? The Hohenzollerns, the leaders of Prussia and then Germany, they're out. The Romanovs, literally all dead in Russia. We'll get to that in 12.4. The United States is now becoming a dominant financial power, and we're going to see this in 13.1 is how they're going to step in as kind of a generator of the world economy to try and help rebuild from World War I. You have greater social equality. The gap between the rich and the poor blur after World War I. Those noble privileges that many British nobility enjoy are going to start to become stripped and taken away. Because, again, it was the poor that fought the war. The rich did not fight, the poor did. Perhaps the things that held them down in the past should be taken away. Women's rights explode. We saw that in 12.2 in our when we watched that video, is that social political freedoms because of women's roles during the war take off and become much more significant. And then, like I said right here, the fall of noble privileges, especially in England. You really don't have that in France because of, the revolution. But this is what I want to focus on here. And we're going to see this in 12.5. There was a general sense before World War I that humanity was getting better and progressing, right? It's an Enlightenment thinking, it's progress, it's optimism that we're moving toward that way. We'd started to see a little bit of more subjectivity and relativism, but there wasn't the pessimism that accompanied that. After the war, people started to question, A, why did we even fight this war? And then B, like, are we getting better? Like, are we improving as a society and civilization? How can we say that if we just killed off 20 million people for a war that we really don't even know why we started it now. It was a war started by the rich, and it's the poor that suffer. Like, what are we doing here? And that pessimism is going to last, honestly, perhaps the whole 20th century. It's going to be hard to shake that, and that confusion and pain will be manipulated by political leaders that will come around about another 15 years from where we are right here. Well, even sooner in Italy, to be honest. So that's going to be something that we have to track, is that pessimism. Last thing, and this is just kind of a warning shot too, we have an economist named John Maynard Keynes, who wrote a book called The Economic Consequences of the Peace. And Keynesian economic philosophy is all about spending, and you may get into that a little bit. Actually, we might do that a little bit ourselves, but definitely in U.S. history. It's all about like spend, 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 right? That gets the economy going. Keynes believed that the harsh terms of the Treaty of Versailles were so harsh that they were going to create unrest, economic and political unrest, that when the treaty was designed to keep war from happening again by punching Germany so hard that they wouldn't be a threat, he saw it as like fomenting angst, right? And that you're punched so hard that the country still stands, that maybe one day those political leaders in the next generation will want to create a feeling and idea of revenge. And that if you punch so hard, it's going to be hard to help that neighbor up if that neighbor is still there. So something to keep in mind. And because we know what's going to happen, we can say this, but at the time Keynesian thought was very controversial, because it was the hopes and dreams of the people, and into the roaring 20s as they developed, the things would be great, but when we get to the 30s, everything's going to suck again. So hey, that is it for World War I. We have solved the crisis. We have had a peace treaty. We've done all these things. That's great. 12.4, we're going to head to Russia and see what the heck's happening over there. It's going to get very communist-y. And then 12.5 is one of my favorite sections. It's the age of anxiety, and a lot of you will be able to identify that with AP test season coming around the corner. So we'll see you at 12.4. World War I out. Oh, I pushed the button. Okay, let me try that again. World War I out.